Amy Board. I don't know if this is going to be as articulate as ideally I'd like it to be.
Oh, no.
But for the last number of weeks, I have been feeling a little more concerned about the state of all things bleeding disorders than I have usually. And it's kind of, I feel like I want to warn the community, which also feels strange because who am I to warn anybody about anything? But what I'm concerned about right now, dear hemophilia community, is the fact that we have had a lot of fractures in our leadership and in our advocacy structures over the last number of years. There's been a lot of disruption, positive disruption to the treatment landscape, but that disruption does cause all sorts of consternation and processes to be re-examined, and there's payer stuff, and there's 340B stuff, and there's all sorts of stuff. And you made the point in our last episode with your migraine story and your letter that we in the bleeding disorders community and people like me with hemophilia can be reliant on our clinicians at the Hemophilia Treatment Center, our point of contact at our specialty pharmacy, to really fight our biggest fights for us or to do the dirty work. And I think it's true, too. And I think about last week's conversation with Nathan in Washington Days. You know, I don't want to disparage my mother. I love my mother. And she had a lot going on, raising 2 kids with hemophilia as a single parent on 1 income and the whole 9. But I always remember, like, when she would say stuff about, like, oh, other people do that, other people do that. And at a certain point of age, being like, who? Who are the people?
Right.
Like, who's lobbying on my behalf? Who's talking to my representatives? Who's protecting my interests? Just some amorphous, nameless, faceless people?
Right.
I don't trust that. Maybe it should be me. And I think as a community, as we get healthier, as there's more and more treatments that are made available, as life with hemophilia, I just had a friend from 20 years ago call me to say, hey, turns out, going through this stuff with my husband, I'm a genetic carrier of hemophilia. Patrick, tell me about hemophilia right now. And I'm thinking about, like, wow, what a different picture it is to be talking to, she's not even pregnant. They're thinking about family planning. This is a baby that would be probably born next year.
Right.
And thinking about what's hemophilia being born in 2024. Wow, how wonderful. What a different world from when I was born in 1985.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, if we're living in this bleed-free world and in a world where people don't feel like, oh, I don't have to go to the advocacy thing. I don't need to respond to the chapter thing.
Yeah.
I don't need to get involved in HFA's call to help find a noose. Well, then who is supposed to do that work?
Yeah.
And if we don't do the work, fast forward 3 to 5 years, and as all of these rare diseases are starting to see more and more products come to market, the 95% that historically have had no,
Right.
we are a leader in that group. And it almost
Yes.
feels to me like we are willingly backsliding, that we are willingly taking steps backwards because there's this idea that, like, well, we're all getting healthier, so let's just make sure that we, like, bring up the basement for the women who have been ignored, and DEI is still something that we got to, like, bring equity to everybody, but we're doing pretty well. I don't agree with that. I think we actually need a lot more attention on what makes this community work, what makes our advocacy organizations work, what makes the networking of all of this work, why do we do it, and if we believe in it, are we making sure that we're pouring water on the soil that makes this work, or are we distracted? Are we looking at other things? Are we too fractured? And, you know, without getting too inside baseball, and then I'll leave this here, like, I'm a part of different initiatives and projects and committees and assignments and task force. Like, I have some visibility into the inner workings of some of these places. And I'm telling you, I'm concerned. So I ask those who are listening to this podcast, because you are of above average engagement, you're listening to this podcast. What could you be doing to help make sure that you and your family's health today, tomorrow, and 5 years is as optimized as possible? Are you doing all the things you could be doing? And if you're not, is there one thing more that you could add to make sure, again, that you, your family now and in the future are taken care of? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
I agree. And I would also add one more bullet to that. As you who are listening, who are engaged listening to this podcast, you're obviously engaged. What can you do to build relationships within your community to draw more people in and to identify leaders within the community, to identify maybe some outliers in the community that are lonely, that aren't doing well, that maybe don't have access to some of the things that are new and shiny? One of the things that I think in my own medication advocacy journey, one of the physicians said on this webinar, it is because of the science and this new science that is so exciting that we're having these issues. And, payers are just far behind. They want to use what has worked in the past, what is cheaper. And those of us in the hemophilia community, we have been the same for a long time. And here we are on this paradigm shift of treatment, and you as the patient get to choose what you want based on your lifestyle, and that is going to take more advocacy and more education and more awareness and more knowledge and then more action. And so I love your call to action to this. We've been talking over the last year that attendance is down at some of these things.
Yep.
Everybody does. I think coming out of the pandemic, everybody's quote unquote fine.
Right.
There is always going to be a need for our community. There is always going to be kind of a safety net for those that are not having a good experience that will slowly, ease out of that. And those of you that are listening, what can you do to optimize your own advocacy, your own family, and also to build relationships in the community and bring folks in and identify leadership?
And if you have ideas that you want to share outwardly, you can ping us on social media, Bloodstream Media, Amy or myself, or shoot us an email, mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com if this is an issue that is of interest to you and you have some thoughts or ideas about that you'd like to share.